this? I think so. I think we're okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is my talk on the thirsty brain. What is this guy talking about? All right, what is this guy? I don't know who this guy is. I'm not entirely sure what you're talking about. All right, yeah, so today we're going to be talking about hydration and how it relates to the brain and cognitive performance. And it's not really a sexy topic. I know a lot of people are probably just going to be like, oh, you're just going to tell me to drink more water. And kind of, yeah, that's kind of what it's going to be. I'm going to tell you to drink more water. But I do want to just underline a few key points about it, some of the consequences about it, and also at the end give you some practical strategies for how to manage this, because try as we might, I think this is one of those things where a lot of times people are like, yeah, I know it's important, but I admittedly don't do a good job with this. And so anytime you can have a good reminder for something like that, for something as key and as important as this, I think it's worthy of discussing. All right, so and we got this guy who said he wanted to debate me. We deleted him? Okay, all right, whatever. I mean, if he wants to debate, I feel like debating usually, by the way, personally, at least, I try to stay away from it. I mean, I have done some hot takes with people, but I usually find that the people who are on the other ends of debates just get more entrenched in their own belief system, and they're not really swayed by whatever facts you present. And so that's a little bit disheartening. But admittedly, the counter argument is people who are watching the debate and maybe get swayed. So, I've gone back and forth on that. But yeah, anyway, some kind of troll guy. So it is what it is. All right, so who am I? For the people who don't know me, I think everyone here should know me. But just to briefly go over, my name is Casey Thomas. I'm what I call a performance dietitian, which basically means I tell people what to eat in order to perform better. My background before I was a dietitian, though, I used to work in clinical research in the private sector, and I used to investigate all sorts of different supplements and pharmaceuticals and their impacts on the brain in both a healthy and a clinical population. So I'm a published scientific author, have a lot of exposure there. I like to nerd out about the science, and I can talk way too long about a lot of these things. A lot of times people have to give me kill signs and just be like, shut up, Casey, you're talking way too much about this stuff. So forgive me if this talk gets technical. It comes from genuine interest and passion. To this day, I still keep my foot in the academic world. I do scientific peer review for journals. I teach at a couple of universities, and I still do a lot of work in the performance dietetic space. So I'm in my private practice. I used to oversee the sports nutrition program for UCLA Athletics. I've worked with pro teams, and I transitioned into esports about a decade ago, and there was a natural kind of parallel between the work that I was doing in traditional sports with esports. And so a lot of the same strategies that I was using to enhance cognitive measures in traditional sports had, direct applicability to esports. And me being a gamer myself, albeit very poor, I felt like a little bit a very poor gamer. So if anyone wants a really, really heavy duo, hit me up. But a lot of those skills transferred over, and it's felt like a little bit of a return to home for me to serve this population who I feel like gets taken advantage of, candidly, by a lot of companies and things, and that makes me sad. And there's no real nutrition professionals in the space, so I try to do what I can here, and hopefully there's some value there. But enough about me. I do not like talking about myself. Hopefully I can keep it focused on the content. And so here's one more slide just about some esports teams I've worked with, just so I know what I'm talking about, and I've given some strategies, and I can highlight some specific work with some teams if anybody's curious. But let's move on, shall we? So a lot of times people will say that they know that the body is mostly water. I know when I was a kid, they told me that your body is like over half of it's water, 2/3 of your body's water, whatever the number is that they tell you. And there's a reason for that, okay? The reason is water is supremely important for human functioning. Otherwise, your body would not be 2/3 or whatever percentage water. Like, that should clue you into what a human absolutely needs and is critically necessary for just normal day-to-day functioning, but also performance. And the really interesting and fascinating thing is, I didn't learn this until I was in college in my neurobio program, was that the brain, in contrast to the rest of the body, is much more water than the rest of the body, relatively by weight. So the brain can be, depending on the individual, can be as high as 80% water by weight, which is kind of nuts when you think about it. It's just like a big old water sponge. And part of it has to do with there's these like, there's kind of like these holes in your brain, I guess, where they're open spaces and there's a lot of water in there. So it's like your brain is surrounded by water, and it's like on the inside it's also got a lot of water. So it's cushioned in between two water layers. And then within the actual brain space, you see it's just every single cell has a whole bunch of water inside of it too. So it's just like cushioned with water beneath and above, and then inside is all water. So your brain is a stupid amount water. And what this kind of means is that your brain will actually feel the negative effects of dehydration before the rest of the body. So you may get a little bit thirsty when you're running and it's hot and stuff outside, but before that happens, your brain will already have been feeling the strain and will have had compromised performance. So water, really important for the brain. It's so important actually that they have these like designated, they call them these little like aquaporin channels. It's basically like they have specialized transporters to get water into your brain because your brain needs water so much. In contrast to a lot of other areas where it's like passive diffusion, to harken back to some like PTSD from my high school bio days. There's like osmosis and whatever, all that stuff. But the brain actually has designated channels to like pump water in as needed. When we look at a brain, and you look at a nice, beautiful, healthy brain, it looks completely normal underneath a brain scanner. When you look at a dehydrated brain underneath a brain scanner, because it is so much water, it will have physically shrunk in size. And this is kind of shocking, actually, because it looks, to an untrained reader of these scans, it'll look somewhat like a brain with Alzheimer's disease. And there's a little bit of a joke that I used to, I used to like show like real photos of this, but people don't like the graphic images, I guess. But with a lot of the teams that I've worked with, the running joke with hydration is like, don't be a raisin brain. You don't want your brain to be all shriveled and wrinkly. So you want to make sure that the brain is nice and plump and full with water, because it will literally shrink. So, it's the opposite of big brain move, is to have like no water, because your brain will physically shrink. And so what are the thresholds? What are the thresholds where dehydration really matters? And older data said 2% dehydration would impact all of your cognitive measures, but the newer data, I say relatively newer, this is like still like 20, 30 years old, but the newer data said actually 1% dehydration. It starts at as little as 1% dehydration, and it just linearly gets worse after that. So looking at these, you can see this is a cognitive test on the left, and you can see as the person becomes more dehydrated how it's just a beeline straight down. So you start out really bad, or you start out really good on the left, and then every single percent dehydrated you just meaningfully score worse and worse and worse. So you go from an 85% on this cognitive test all the way down to close to a 65%. So you drop about 5% score on this cognitive test for every single percentage dehydrated you are after the first. And also kind of meaningful to gamers is reaction time, right? So on the right here is looking at something similar. It was a cognitive task, but looking at how quickly you completed the cognitive task. And so you can see the line increases as dehydration increases. And what this means is it's taking you longer to do the task, which means you're slowing down, right? Let's see, the question was, how long does it take typically to go down 1% if you haven't drunk water in a while? I want to answer that question, but I can't answer that question. And the reason is because there are so many confounding variables there. Like, is your room held to a temperature that's 75 degrees, or is it held to 70 degrees? Is there airflow in your room, or isn't there? How much clothes are you wearing? How sweaty of an individual are you because of hormones, or maybe like just worked out, or maybe you got direct sunlight on you, or maybe you're stressed out? Do you breathe with your mouth open, and so you're losing, fluids that way? There's like, the humidity in the room. There's so many external variables for this that it's impossible for me to just like give a stock number. But what I can say is you can learn what that is by doing a sweat rate test. And this is something that I typically recommend and will do with each of my players that I work with, is I'll do a sweat rate in 2 different scenarios. And you can test it in like multiple scenarios, but usually with the athletes I'm working with, we're trying to test your sweat rates across whatever your performance scenario is. So like if it's gaming, if it's, being a soccer athlete, whatever it is, if it's running, if it's weights, we'll do whatever the key performance scenario is. And we'll, how it works in short is you weigh yourself before the task and you weigh yourself after the task. And as long as you didn't drink any fluid or use the bathroom during, you're going to see a drop in weight. And that drop in weight divided by how much time that was, so let's say it was a 90-minute gaming block or something like that, that's going to be what we would call your sweat rate. Now, you have to do a couple things. You want to make sure that you're as close to full dry as possible. So like, if you happen to get sweaty for whatever reason, then you want to towel dry off, because if the wetness is on you, it's still on the scale. If you do drink some stuff, then you have to add that to the formula. If you do use the bathroom, you have to collect it and measure it and add that to the formula too. So it becomes a little bit more complicated that way. So I usually recommend people just like don't consume anything and don't use the bathroom. But yeah, we'll do this in a very hot scenario. So like if your room is really sweaty because it's, no airflow, really hot. And then we'll do this in very cool conditions with like the AC ramped up. And you'll measure their sweat rates, and then we'll actually be able to game plan how much fluid do you as an individual, rather than me just guessing, need across a particular unit of time. And if you want help with this, just feel free to hit me up. But yeah, that's typically what we'll do so that we can measure it. Realizing my energy drink and vape snack combo might be why my rank climbs aren't going well. Yep, probably. Though, admittedly, sorry, man. Admittedly, one thing that I like about energy drinks as a formula, in contrast to, say, like pill versions of, like caffeine pills or gums or things like that, is the energy drink is mostly water. Right? So you actually do get some little bit of hydration out of the energy drink formulation. So it kind of serves double duty, because you're also getting the compounds that are in there in addition to the fluid that you're getting, which is kind of nice. If you are dehydrated, should you intake water, or should you take supplements like electrolytes and creatine to decrease how dehydrated you are? Yeah, it's going to depend a little bit on what you're doing. Electrolyte beverages and creatine, they are better hydrating than pure water, in that they can more quickly, they make the water more sticky, is kind of the way to think about it. It's usually easier to get the fluid into your body, and it's more likely to stick around rather than just being excreted. So if you're in a situation where you have extreme dehydration, and I have a slide on this later, but just trying to get ahead of these questions. If you have a situation where you need rapid rehydration, then electrolytes is helpful. If you have a situation in which you don't really need rapid rehydration, and it's just like, I just want to get better by tomorrow, then you probably don't have to go too crazy with it, and it doesn't matter so much. It takes about 24 to 48 hours to adjust your hydration status, which basically means hydration for today started yesterday and hydration for tomorrow starts today. So make sure that if you have a key cognitive task that you care about tomorrow, that you're very well hydrated today. If you are in like a crunch situation and you need rapid rehydration, that's where these, they call them ORSs, the oral rehydration solutions. That's where those beverages become particularly useful. All right, let me, yeah, okay. All right, I see that. All right, cool. All right, let's keep it going. So in addition to what I just talked about, right, so like cognitive performance and worse cognitive performance and a slowing in your reaction times. They've also checked this out in mood and all sorts of other kind of cognitive tests. So they've tested this out. A lot of times when people look at nootropic literature, what they'll see is that all these like cognitive enhancing substances are tested in elderly folks or people with like clinical issues. So you might look at rehydration literature and it's in people with like kidney disease. And it's like, okay, great. I don't have kidney disease. I'm just, I'm just me. I'm just a regular dude, and I'm trying to play some games, right? But they've tested this in young, healthy, very high-performance individuals, and we see that it absolutely impacts not only performance measures, but also obviously physical performance measures in addition to cognitive performance measures, but also mood state. And mood state is really, really important for performance as well, too. So we know this from the literature. It's well validated, and it's not something you can just overlook. I have a lot of players who tell me that thirst is what guides them in their hydration patterns. They usually just drink whenever they're thirsty. And the unfortunate reality is for most people, this just doesn't get the job done. So this is a quote from an international body, but basically what, to kind of break it down into layman's terms, I guess, is your body's thirst signal is like an oh crap signal. So if you are thirsty, that's your body saying, if you continue on this route, I will die. Please go get some fluid right now. And in order for that thirst signal to come up, you have to already be dehydrated. And if you are already dehydrated and now you go drink some fluid, then it's going to be several hours before even like the first drop is really making it into the system where you need it to go. So you're kind of already screwed from a performance angle, because if you're just, let's say you're just queuing up or something, and you're like, oh, I'm a little thirsty. Okay, well, even if you drink water right now, you're still impaired because your body was already dehydrated walking into that moment. And, when you think about fluid and how it gets into your body, you have to drink it. It's got to go through your stomach. It's got to go into your small intestine, large intestine, get absorbed, get into your blood, move from your blood into the organs and tissues that it needs to go into, and then finally get into those particular cells that need it. And that whole timeline takes a while. It's not like the second you take a sip of fluid that it's immediately in your brain. We do not have the technology for that just yet. So if you are thirsty, it means you are already dehydrated and your performance is already compromised. So you really do want to make sure that you're not letting thirst be your cue and that you are getting ahead of it. And so this leads me to tend to create hydration game plans for people and do things like the sweat rate that I already mentioned, where we're just putting people, it's like, hey, here's a water bottle that's X amount of ounces or liters, and you just have to drink 3 of these in a day or whatever it is. We put people on these game plans so that way their body doesn't get a chance to really feel thirst. And that's when you know you're doing a really good job, is when you don't get thirsty. This just shows that most people do a really bad job at being hydrated. So depending on the literature that you look at, anywhere from 30 to like 66%. So like 1 to 2/3 of people are showing up to competition and to key cognitive tasks already dehydrated. It's kind of nuts, actually. In my own personal experience, I would say in the professional athlete world and in the professional esports world, it's always been at least 50% of individuals are showing up already dehydrated to like key tasks. Like this is a world championship kind of thing. Like these people are already dehydrated, and it blows my mind that it's such a simple thing to fix, and yet literally half of the people are just not doing it. It's like literally just drink some water or whatever and you'll be so much better equipped. It's such an easy edge over your opponent. Like it's literally such an easy edge over your opponent. And even if you're not a pro, like you're not a pro athlete, when we look at typical workers, we see that most people do a really bad job at drinking fluids during their 9 to 5 job, whatever it is. So roughly like a third of people show up to work dehydrated, and then 10% more of them are reporting being dehydrated or are measurably dehydrated by the end of their work shift. So people, even if you're not a pro athlete, most people do just a really, really bad job at hydrating throughout the day during their work schedule, because usually you're busy with work, you get distracted, and you're only really taking sips, maybe like at your lunch break or something like that. All right. Yeah, I'm guilty of this too, and I'll talk about a couple of practical tips. Oh man, we only got 3 people in here, and I'm one of them. That's okay. I like you guys. All right. Overhydration. So I'll go faster, and then I'll be able to kind of open it up to you guys if you guys have questions. So I have had a few individuals who kind of go to the other end of the spectrum, where they overhydrate themselves. They're like, you know what? I need to be really good about my hydration patterns. I've heard water's really good for me. Let me just chug a whole bunch of electrolytes. Let me just chug, a couple gallons of water a day, and they go crazy with it. And the problem with this is actually you can dilute your blood. And there's been some scary stories about this actually, and like there are some college campuses where they go dry because there was there was some damage that was done to some students and some harm that was caused to them in like fraternities who were doing binge drinking and things like that as part of their hazing rituals. And so what some of these dry campuses did was these fraternities would do water hazing instead of alcohol hazing, and they killed people. They killed these pledges because they overhydrated them, and they diluted their blood so much that it didn't have any of the stuff that they needed it to, and that's really sad. But not to get morbid or anything, but we see this inverted U-shaped curve here. So this little chart on the right here is a composite cognitive test score. And so what you see is whether you're overhydrated or dehydrated, there's a little bit of a drop in performance, and the sweet spot is right in the middle. So it's this inverted U phenomenon. And so you want to have, a proxy is your urine. You want to have a light colored urine, a light yellow colored urine. If it looks like water coming out, you're probably overhydrated. It shouldn't look like water coming out. It should have a light little tinge to it. One little caveat to this is just that a lot of energy drinks and pre-workouts and those and like B vitamin supplements, those will artificially color the urine a neon yellow color, and that means that even if you are really well hydrated, it's still going to look yellow, and you may end up viciously making the problem worse, because you are like, man, it's still neon yellow, I'm going to keep drinking water, and it's still neon yellow, I'm going to keep drinking water, and that can also lead to some problems. So you can't really trust it if you are habitually using some of those like B supplement stuff, so just be aware of that. Some other things that can mess with this, in recent years, there's been an uptick in people who are using methylene blue. This will turn your urine like a blue-green color, so just be aware of that. I'm trying to think if there are other things. Those are probably the big ones. There's a couple food colorings that'll also mess up urine color, but I think the biggest ones I encounter are the neon B vitamins and then the methylene blue. All right, so how much fluid should you use? Well, the tongue-in-cheek answer is simply, you want to make sure that you're in water balance. You don't want to be progressively losing fluid, and you also don't want to be holding a status of, even chronic dehydration. So you do want to match how much you're spending in a day, or how much you're using in a day, to your intake patterns, okay? So generally, the goal is just to meet or exceed however much you lose throughout the day from everything else. And I don't know how much you're losing throughout the day with everything else, which is why I recommend the sweat rates. They even sell like sweat patches these days, where you can just put the patch on and it will measure your sweat rate, and also I do this for some high-level athletes. It also will measure the minerals that are being excreted from your sweat too, so you know, and we'll actually craft very targeted electrolyte beverages for them that are targeted at your specific sweat composition. It'll be like, okay, we need this much chloride, we need this much magnesium, we need this much sodium, this much potassium, and all this stuff, because it tells you exactly what the concentration of your sweat is. All right, so a couple high-risk scenarios. The first one is mornings, and this is because this is a time point where you haven't drunk any fluid across the preceding very long interval. And I always, myself personally, this is just what I do to get ahead of it, because I am really bad at hydrating myself, is I pay what I call the water tax. And so what I do every night is I fill up a very large, refillable water container. It's 40 ounces. And I fill that up the night before, just in case I need it in the middle of the night, but more importantly, for the morning time. And so what I do is, first thing in the morning, before I do anything else, like before I use the bathroom, before I brush my teeth, before I even get out of bed, I don't let myself step out of bed unless I do 12 to 16 gulps of water. And that's just my rule. I pay this water tax and I just get ahead of it, and I make it so that way I pre-build in, it roughly comes out to be 16 to 24 ounces of fluid. And that can account for as much as maybe a quarter of my total daily needs paid in the first 1 minute of the day, which feels really good. So I am a huge fan of front-loading water where you can. Mondays tend to also be a high-risk scenario, because a lot of times people have different fluid intake patterns across the weekend compared to the weekdays. Travel also does a doozy on people. Airplanes they hold their cabin humidity to something that's more dry than the Sahara Desert, so most people are just bleeding fluid as they're flying on an airplane, which is why a lot of people report being tired after they've gone on an airplane, even when they were able to nap on it. So a lot of times people just feel awful after they get off of airplanes, and it's largely because of this dehydration effect. All right, so what can we do? Interestingly, there's been some new data come out in the last 5 years showing that hydration education like this improves intake in people. So I hope that people will increase their intake. But also, little reminder messages, whether it's someone else who's bugging you, you got an accountability buddy. There's accountability apps that can remind you. There's also these smart water bottles that will track your fluid intake nowadays. There's all these systems now to try to help people remember to drink fluid. And, I come from a world where back in the day I used to have I'd get some Scotch tape and I would write on it, okay, you need to drink to this level by, 9 a.m. You need to drink to this level by noon. You need to drink to this level by 3 p.m. and so on. And they sell these bottles now with those markers on them already across the day. But anyway, there's a lot of different tools out there. And the really exciting thing about this is we know that people who hear the message to drink more water usually do a good job about drinking more water, at least in the short term. But when you follow up with these people and they stick with it, you see something magical happen. And even though the app or the reminder system or the education session, whatever it is, even though that just told you to drink more water, what we see on the people that we follow long-term who are doing these things is they have all these other beneficial, positive lifestyle and health outcomes. Okay, things like decreases in sedentary behavior, lowered blood pressure, improvements in vertical jump strength, more self-care. Okay, all these things aren't really related to drinking water at all. But what seems to happen is we call drinking water kind of like an anchor habit, where you suddenly feel like, oh, I'm doing this thing to care for my health. Maybe I should do other things for my health as well too. And so drinking water seems to be like an anchor habit that can be the first domino in a long string of actions to make you just be a better version of you. So I'm a huge fan of this one because it just gives you that kick in the butt to start taking other things seriously, even if it's at a very almost imperceptible level. You do seem to start caring a lot more about yourself. So this is a very low lift thing to improve that can be that first domino for other patterns and other habits that you want to develop. I'm a big fan of environmental design. My friends hate me because what I'll do is I'll actually print out, I think I showed you guys earlier this, where was it? Yeah, this one. Drinking enough water, this urine color chart. I used to do this all the time. I printed out like 100 of these, and then I would just like hang it in all my friends and family's bathrooms, like above the toilet. And I used to just do this and like put it everywhere, and they just be like, Casey, I can't believe you like hung up another urine color chart in my bathroom, man. So I'm a big fan of throwing reminders everywhere that you can get them. So the urine color chart is a good one. If there's like I work with a lot of businesses, and we'll try to get refilling water stations there. If I'm working with a team, we'll try to get them refillable water bottles. If I'm working with a team, we'll try to get like inside the playroom or the game room, we'll try to make sure that they have like a mini fridge and it's only stocked with water. I mentioned that there are some smart water bottles these days with like built-in or corresponding apps that can remind you and track how much you've drunk from that container. So those are pretty cool. Someone mentioned earlier asking about electrolytes. I kind of gave a good answer, I think, earlier regarding rapid rehydration. But some people tell me that they just don't like the taste of water, and so they don't drink water. And that's okay. I'm not going to throw him under the bus, but my best dietitian friend in the world, he's a genius. He's very smart. He literally refuses to drink water. And I used to live with him for a little bit. And in his fridge was just Diet Sprite and Diet Mountain Dew. And that was all he drank. That was it. He did not drink water. He did not drink one sip of water. And this went on for years and years and years. It was crazy. I don't know how he survived, but that was what he did. And so what I would say is, if the choice is no fluid, or I'm going to have, some kind of flavored whatever fluid, then go for it. Like, I would rather you have fluid, given the importance of hydration status to the human body. So if you like the taste of electrolytes, if you like those little drops, if you like, doing the infusers where you soak it in some berries or like cucumbers and mints or whatever, if you like sparkling waters, are they as good as water? No, not really, but they're infinitely superior to no fluid whatsoever. So I'm a huge fan of leaning into those as much as is needed for the individuals I work with. And then lastly, I'll mention this because this is more applicable to other countries where maybe they don't have clean drinking water. In some areas, my wife told me about this, back in China, there are some cities where they don't have really good drinking water. And so what a lot of the population does is they actually will just have a bunch of cucumbers, and they'll carry cucumbers with them and eat those throughout the day. And that is almost, that's like one of the highest sources of water intake for them throughout the day, because that's what has clean water in it, in contrast to their regular drinking water. So there are very high water foods that you can also leverage as part of your diet to increase your total fluid intake. And that can be like a sneaky way to get extra fluids in if you're really bad at it. Or if you're in a dicey situation, like, you travel somewhere where there's poor drinking water access. This is a fun little slide which just shows, they call this like a hydration index. And this just ranks different beverages relative to water at how good they are at hydrating you, which basically means how good are they at getting fluid into your body and it's sticking around. And one thing that you'll see, and I'll highlight this here very candidly, it's very common, especially in European countries, for a lot of teams, a lot of like soccer teams, for example, to go out after a game and have a beer. And traditional sports dietetics says, oh, no, alcohol is dehydrating, it's bad for you, and all this kind of stuff. Now, while I agree that beers and alcohol are bad for you, they're not really conducive for recovery and everything, they are, in the strict sense of the word, not actually dehydrating. They are net hydrating, in the same way that coffee, which you see on the far left here, is also net hydrating. So they have led to a net increase in fluid in your system. Now, admittedly, it's worse than pure water. It's not quite as good as pure water, but you still come out ahead with more fluids in your system. And this doesn't mean I'm advocating for these. It's just that those do, strictly speaking, count towards net fluid intake across the day. On the other end of the spectrum, you see kind of what you would expect of like your, like your Pedialytes and stuff like that, which are oral rehydration solutions. Interestingly, milk is a really, really good rehydration beverage, mostly because it's got some carbs in there and some minerals and stuff. So it rehydrates really, really well. And so a lot of times when people are having their post-workout smoothies, it also doubles as being a nice rehydrator as well too when you use milk as a base. All right, a couple modifiers. Protein and sodium increase your fluid needs. So if your diet is crazy high protein, you're going to need a little bit more fluid. Same thing, if you're having crazy high sodium, you need more fluid. I'm not a sodium hater in the same way that a lot of other dietitians are. And, I'm happy to go in further into the weeds on that if people are interested. But, one of the just to give an example, one of the common critiques is people say, oh yeah, sodium leads to like high blood pressure. Okay, well, in the United States, people who have a high sodium intake do have high blood pressure, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the sodium was what caused it. And as an example, if you look at adult men in Japan, their sodium intake is like 5x what it is for the average adult, United States person. And they have a lower prevalence of hypertension. So how do we square that if sodium is the primary driver for high blood pressure? Doesn't make sense, right? So sodium isn't the cause. It's, at least in the United States, it's a lot of these processed foods and junk foods. Like sodium is a good shelf, makes the foods last a lot longer. We say it has a good shelf stability. Sodium is used there, and it's also added to a lot of processed junk to make it taste better. So it's actually the processed junk that is causing the high blood pressure. It's not the sodium by itself. And sodium by itself, outside of kidney issues, is fine. I don't care. So anyway, all that to be said is just extra sodium in a diet requires extra fluid intake in the same way that extra protein also requires extra fluid intake. So people with high protein diets or high sodium diets should be looking to consume more fluid. Lastly, I'll just add here, because I think all of us are caffeine users. I know I am. Caffeine is known to suppress thirst signals. And I said before that you shouldn't get thirsty, but what's even more problematic is if you're not getting thirsty when you should be getting thirsty, right? Because if you were dehydrated, you want that thirst signal. But sometimes what can happen is a lot of gamers are having so much caffeine that they just stop getting the thirst signal. And so when I was speaking earlier and I said, oh yeah, you shouldn't get thirsty, that's how you know you're doing it right. Well, the caveat for gamers is, maybe I'm not getting thirsty, so I might think I'm doing good, but if I'm pounding back a whole bunch of caffeine, like I do, then maybe I'm not getting that authentic thirst signal like I should be. So in that case, you may be fooled into thinking that your hydration status is better than it really is. So just be careful if you are having a lot of caffeine that you're paying particular attention to this and being very mindful about your fluid intake, because you can't really even trust the thirst signals that you are getting. I said this earlier, and I think you said it, the reverse of the gateway drug concept. Yeah, water is like, it's free, right? Like water is free. It's quick, okay? Like if I tell you to eat broccoli or eat some protein or something, are you better tomorrow? No, you're not better tomorrow. Like I wish you were better tomorrow. You're not gonna really notice it though. But you can literally adjust your hydration status in 24 to 48 hours. 50% of your competitors are showing up dehydrated. It's the quickest, easiest, cheapest way to get a leg up on the competition. And we already talked about how it has this like butterfly effect, this like positive vicious cycle where it's an anchor habit for all these other beneficial habits. So like, why not take advantage of this free thing that is going to just make you be healthier and more high performance? I'll even add one more thing. There was a fun study. They tested a bunch of university students. It was like one of those big lecture halls, with like 500 students for like one teacher, which is just a terrible ratio, but that's a whole other conversation. And they did it, what they did was, as they were coming into the classroom, half of them were given water bottles and half of them weren't. And they wanted to look at letter grade scores on the exam that was done that day. And the group of students who had the water while they were in the exam, it was like 9 or 11% better. It was basically a full letter grade better on the exam scored just because they were sipping on water during it. So if you have any key cognitive task, like just sip on water during it also, and that's going to go a really long way for you too. And I'll skip some of these things. There's here, let's just go all the way over here so that way I can wrap up and then just kind of jump over to the few people that are here. But yeah, so I'm not on social very much. I try to be, admittedly. I'm trying to work on it, trying to get better with it. If you want to give me a follow there and like talk to me there, I may not respond, being completely candid. Shoot me a DM in Discord. It's usually the better way to get in touch with me. All right, let me close this out. And let me come over here. I think I'm not sharing screen anymore. Okay. And then let me see if I can turn on camera, maybe. If this doesn't break it. I'm in the garage, guys, so don't be a hater. All right, I think I'm good here. Cool. All right, I will take some questions from the two folks that are here, if you guys got anything, and then we can call it good. Let's see some type in. If you guys don't have any questions, that's also fine too. It's just if you want. No problem, man. I appreciate you. You always showing up, and you showed up for Jonathan's talk and everything, so So we are currently looking to reformulate the electrolytes. So those ones are, I'm doing some advisement work for Neuroptima now with a lot of their formulas, and I'm trying to help them put together some, some different formulas. The Neurolite one is being worked on currently. So there's a little bit of a debate because I think there could be two products. Depending on the need and the demographic who we're trying to serve. So it's an ongoing conversation. I don't know when it's going to be back. I don't have a good answer for you on that one. I can ask them on that one. But as far as electrolytes, what's actually good? I would say the cheapest you can... the cheapest, I like these comments, guys. I love it. Dragonite's awesome. The cheapest one that you can do at home, which is pretty dang good, is literally just for every 16 ounces of fluid or water, add in a pinch of salt and a quarter of a lemon. And that is a pretty dang good approximation at a high level electrolyte, just being totally honest. Beyond that, if you are a high level athlete, we can talk about some high level electrolytes, like if you're really, really sweaty and you're working out like a beast. Gatorade sucks. It's really bad. So Gatorade, Powerade, they used to be tailored to athletes, and they used to be really good ORSs, but they realized that they made more money selling to general population than they did to selling to athletes, because athletes are broke. And so what they did was they reformulated it over the years for taste instead of for performance. And so when you look at high performance athletes these days, we actually don't use Gatorade, Powerade anymore. We may be sponsored by them, but we don't use them. We have specific formulas, specific electrolytes that we'll use for them. So one of them that I really like, more like Haterade, yeah. Man, I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this because it's a Neuroptima talk. All right, so if you are a really, really salty sweater, this is a really good one, is the Right Stuff. I use this for crampers also. There's also for crampers, there's one called Hot Shot, which is based on something completely different. Hot Shot is for crampers. Right Stuff is really, really good for salty sweaters, people who sweat a lot and have a very highly concentrated sweat. So like inside your sweat when it comes out, if it tastes really, really, really salty, Right Stuff is a really good one. That one's actually formulated by NASA. If you are not a high-level athlete, not cramping, not super sweaty, then there are a couple other ones that I think are okay. This one is S tier. Oh, yeah, everyone asked me about that, man. It's like, come on. I'm sure people have tasted their sweat before. So this one is the good one for the regular folks. So for the regular folks, Serasport is really good. This one is military grade. It has a very specific rice solid formulation that's used in there, and so for people who aren't very salty sweaters, and for people who are not crazy beasts, Serasport is a really, really good top-notch option. This one is, again, like formulated by military. If you are looking for commercially available ones, then my next favorite one, like if it's just for regular folks and like you aren't really exercising a whole lot and you just are like, hey, I just want something that's like not awful, what should I take? You can do the DIY one I said, or I like drip drops. Those ones are also like fairly decent. Everyone asks me, I'm not a fan of Liquid IV. Sorry to throw them under the bus. They tried to partner with UCLA when I was there, and I was just like, I hate your formula. But yeah, drip drop's pretty good. We're working on, like I said, the Neuroptima formula, so it will be great if I have anything to say about it. Yeah, I think those are all of my recommendations on electrolytes. If you have a specific one in mind that you're curious about, just let me know. Is mixing an electrolyte formula with flow state okay, or would you recommend having those separately? Yeah, you can do that. There's no really an up or a downside to doing that, other than it's going to make the fluid that the flow state was in be a bit more sticky. Like it's going to hydrate slightly better. I would say though that if you're someone who struggles with fluid intake, then I would probably space it out, because you're going to drink more, you're going to have more flavored stuff. Whereas, so flow state tastes good, right? And then your electrolyte beverage should taste good. So hopefully you can get at least those two different hydrating beverages in you across the day. So I'd probably say space it out if you're bad about your fluid intake patterns. But if you're good about your fluid intake patterns, then yeah, sure. I don't care, mix them. Yeah, salt and lemon works out really well. Yeah, no problem. Take care, Infi. Appreciate you. Cool. All right, gentlemen. Well, it's been fun. It's been good. We'll reconvene at another time with another topic. Feel free to shoot me a message if you got anything else that you want to hear about. Appreciate you both. Hope you have a good rest of your day and a safe 4th of July if you celebrate that kind of thing. Take care.